Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Legal Tech Week, the show where we talk about the top stories in legal tech and innovation from the past week, or in this case, maybe the past 2 weeks, because we didn't do one last week. But plenty to talk about this week. No reason to dig into the past. This is May 31st, 2024, and that is a very important date because it happens to be the birthday of one of our panelists today, Greg Lambert. So, Greg, happy birthday.
Thank you. 30 for almost the second time. So
Yeah, yeah, all
not
right.
not quite, not
No,
quite.
no, no, really? You're not that old, right?
That's
Yeah,
what's your
it,
secret?
it happens.
Yeah, really.
If you stick around long enough.
That's what Mick Jagger said last night. Um, yeah, I mean, we're all young in comparison to the Rolling Stones, and they're still rocking. So I did go to the Rolling Stones concert last night, as we were just talking about before we started the episode here. All right, well, let's introduce this week's panelists. And Victor, you want to kick us off?
Sure. My name is Victor Lee. I am Assistant Managing Editor for the ABA Journal, doing business of law and technology. And I had a very quiet night last night. I did not go see the Rolling Stones. I think I watched hockey.
All right. Stephanie, coming to us from somewhere different.
Yes, Stephanie Wilkins, editor-in-chief of Legal Tech News at ALM. I am up in the Catskills today with zero cell service, but excellent Wi-Fi. So here I am.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And Joe Patrice.
Joe Patrice from Above the Law and Thinking Like a Lawyer podcast. I was hoping, Victor, when you said that you didn't have a big night, you were last night watching. I was like, of course, CNN Max, where they were doing Trump trial coverage with legal analysts, including me. But yeah, no, it was fun. It's really weird doing those things because uh, you think as a lawyer, we all talk about things in certain ways, but the media, especially when it comes to trials, want to ask questions that are not what we think. And I'm like, the number of times I heard questions around how long or was this deliberation too fast or too slow? And I was like, I don't know. I don't know. That's not like a thing. Yeah. So I'm glad to
Yeah.
be back
Yeah,
talking
well, I
tech.
wish I had watched that. Well, I don't wish I had watched that because I would have rather been at the Rolling Stones, but I didn't know you were on last night. But I will say that on the entire time driving down to this concert, it was just as the verdict came out, like as we left, and so we're listening to NPR for the most part going down there. And my wife, who is a lawyer, but a corporate lawyer who never practiced anything like trial law or criminal law, was just peppering me with questions about the appeals process and the review process and what happens now. And I didn't know half the answers. So I wish I had been watching CNN and could have watched Joe. Realized how little I know about criminal procedure at this point in my career. And anyway, last but not least, we've already kind of introduced you, Greg, but who are you?
Sure. I am the now 56-year-old Greg Lambert, who is the Chief Knowledge Services Officer at Jackson Walker in Houston, Texas, and I co-founder of the blog Three Geeks and a Law blog and the podcast The Geek and Review, which is Bob's second favorite podcast.
It is, it is. So 34 times 2 doesn't equal 50, but whatever. All right. Well, bunch of stuff to talk about this week, but I don't know. I kind of feel like the biggest buzz this week was all around this Stanford study that came out on looking at the degree of hallucinations in legal research products, and they initially came out with the study, I guess, right at the end of last week when I happened to be on vacation and missed all the fun. Um, they only just what yesterday, I think, reissued the study, and one of the reasons for some of the backlash against the study or criticism of the study was that it looked at the LexisNexis legal research AI product, Lexis Plus AI. But in Thomson Reuters case, it didn't look at their AI legal research product. Instead, it looked at their practical law AI product, which is not really a legal research product to begin with. It's a very limited body of legal resources that it covers, and it's really focused on providing practical, forms and guidance and that sort of thing. So this week, Thomson Reuters gave them access to the Westlaw product, Westlaw Precision product, and they just reissued the report yesterday and found it was worse than some people thought it might have been. I think I haven't had a chance to really go through it in detail. I was just reading it a little bit this afternoon before the show. Um, but I don't know. Greg, I know you had a bit to say about this on LinkedIn and elsewhere this week, and this falls a little bit into your professional bailiwick as well. So, what was your take on all this?
Well, I found myself in the odd position of defending Westlaw and Lexis on this one for a bit. One, the the way that the Stanford HAI group released this was kind of a BS move. They knew that they did not have access to Westlaw's legal research tool when they initially released it. I guess they had a deadline that they were going for, but they gave Thomson Reuters a copy of the report, and Thomson Reuters, who has not given access to the product to any academics, so it's not like they've singled them out. It's this they're not releasing it to law schools, I think, until the fall. And so I thought it was kind of a ploy for them to get access to it by releasing it. They knew they kind of I think people kind of feigned that they didn't recognize the difference between the two products, but they had a Stanford law professor that was on the writing panel, and I know sometimes that just means that they signed off on something. They scanned it, they signed off on it, but the fact they buried this on page 9 in the original report, uh, kind of showed, I thought kind of showed their hand on it. One of the writers had a blog post that came out, I think, last night, that kind of hinted at they used this to leverage pressure on getting it. So I just thought right out of the bat, that was just, I mean, I don't think it's unethical, but I don't think it met the standards that you normally think of with a prestigious school like Stanford. Um, Now, with the new report, one, wow, how fast were they able to turn that around? Because
Yeah.
they had to do all 202 of those and grade them and score them within really just a few days. Um,
And come up
now,
with nice new graphics.
yeah, and come up with some nice new graphics. I will say this, that there's a lot of nuance in the way that they're scoring it. And the one thing that I do give them credit for was they were very standard across the board. The way that they did the scoring and results was above board. Um, However, I did think that one of the reasons that the West product scored as bad as it is, and they mention it in the report, is the West AI tool gives you a much bigger answer than Lexis or Practical Law. And so it was either all right or all correct in the answer, or if there was one thing in the answer that was wrong, then it was all wrong. So, and they mention this, but kind of in passing, that they're doing that. But I think the study was good. I think the other thing that they did a really good job pointing out was the fact that, oh my God, these vendors are advertising this as hallucination free or some variation, or they're bending themselves into a pretzel to say, the marketing team to say this is hallucination free, when everyone knows that it's nearly impossible. And the way that they're set up now, it is impossible to be hallucination free. So I could go on, Bob, but I can see you're wanting to jump in.
No, I no, I have to find to have you go on. I mean, there's a lot to talk about here. I did feel like it was I didn't know anything about their having a deadline to produce this report because it just seemed to me premature, and it was a little bit I don't want to say dishonest, but it was one of the things I picked up on because they actually quoted out of my podcast. They quoted an interview I had. I had Mike Dane, who's the head product head of Westlaw, on my podcast, and on the podcast he was talking about the fact that the AI assisted research in Westlaw Precision is substantially hallucination free, and they kept quoting that, but then they were talking about practical law, which was not what he was talking about when he said that, and and they never kind of said, yeah, he said this, but he didn't say it about the product we're talking about, and that seemed a little bit weird that they did that.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, what really pissed me off, Bob, was they cited you 3 times and they cited me 0. So
yeah, well, uh, yeah, that was more dishonesty on their part.
yeah,
But,
and there's a question that I think really kind of fits here, because a lot of people, speaking of practical law, West Precision AI, which they called ARAI, I think is how they did it in the report. And then you have co-counsel, which wasn't graded, and actually co-counsel now, from what I'm understanding from the folks at West, is anything that has to do with like summarization, drafting, that sort of thing that's not specifically legal research will be sold under the co-counsel brand.
right. So yeah,
So
co-counsel's not really a legal research tool anymore, even though it was when Casetext first launched
yeah,
it before Thomson Reuters
I
acquired it.
think that all went over to Mike Dane's group, all the pure legal research. So it's a little odd because they keep telling me no, 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 it's all under one brand, but I'm like, do I have to buy it separately? And they're like, yeah. And I said, well, then it's not under one brand.
Yeah. So the new version though that came out still found a rate of hallucinations in the Westlaw product like nearly twice the rate of Lexis. So, I mean, Lexis comes out looking pretty good in this overall, I think.
Again, I think West was being punished because of giving a more detailed answer.
Yeah.
If they would have cut their answer in half, their chances are they'd probably, because I looked at some of those, and it would get like 4 of the 5 points of law correct, but it would have one that was incorrect. And
Yeah.
it goes to show, legal research is really hard to do. And it's really interesting because I think probably one of the things that's tripping up West more than anything is they have so many layers. So they have the core research, but then they also have Keysight, and then they also have the citator that they're embedding into this. And AI doesn't really have a good ability to kind of go, okay, well, let me do this, but if it does this over here, let me kick that out. It does show that, again, research is freaking hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was so confused by this study. And in fairness, Isha is the one that dove into it. And I know, Greg, you talked to her a lot about it. And so, but I don't know. I mean, I'm glad you said maybe they had a deadline or something, because I was so confused because initially they were like, we asked and asked and asked for the right product, and they only gave it to us 2 days in advance, so we couldn't test it. But then suddenly they had the right product and they turned around and revised study in like 2 days. So why couldn't you have just held the study for 2 days? Like, if you could do it that fast. That was my first confusion. But then also, like, I was almost more disappointed with the Lexis answer, because they were like, well, no, I mean, we've tested it and our results are better than that, but we won't show you our testing. I'm like, well, so that was Isha's whole article was like, fine, whatever the Stanford study says, if where are the companies benchmarking their own products, and why won't they show any of it? Where is any of the transparency in benchmarking of legal tech products in general in the industry?
Yeah, that's really supposed to be I mean, that's really kind of the thrust of this report, right? Is not necessarily what it found on hallucination rates, but that we need more information. We need more benchmarking. I don't know. I mean, it'd be great if the vendors did more of that. I mean, we had this discussion a couple of years ago around some of the analytics products that were out there, and I know the American Association of Law Libraries, we had some committees that did some benchmarking reports on those, and maybe there needs to be more of that independent, just like what this study was, more of the independent benchmarking happening out there.
Yeah, and usually, well, one, I can't really think of any type of expectation that purchasers of Lexus or Westlaw have on benchmarks. I mean, there's kind of a, 35 years of experience and maybe longer, dealing with them, that they've kind of built a rapport and relationship and with the law firms over the years that they're expected to be the two best products. The courts, kind of sometimes even pick a favorite, saying you have to, if you're going to use citations, use Westlaw, because that's what we have access to. And so I really could not think of a comparison independent study that was done, to benchmark how well these products are, other than kind of self-reporting and marketing materials along the way. Bob, I mean, other than the AAA one, can you think of where it's been expected?
No, no, I haven't seen anything. I mean,
Well, and also, I mean, honest, generally speaking, that might be fine, but I feel like where you get into trouble is when you literally have words on your website that say hallucination free or 100% hallucination free. That's not how AI works. That's not how RAG works. There is no such thing. When you start saying things like that are just ridiculous, that's when you start inviting people to start testing that and proving you wrong, because that's just not possible.
yeah.
Yeah,
And also, I think it's
I think
problematic.
Lexus. Oh, go ahead, Victor.
I think it's problematic, just the whole study. I mean, and I don't know what, like, I mean, maybe Greg, you can share some light on this. I mean, like, what possible deadline could they have been under? I mean, it's Stanford. They don't have like, they're not like a daily news site or something. I mean, yeah. What could it possibly? Because, and look, I don't want to sound like I'm standing up for these companies. They don't need anyone to do that for them. But it's kind of unfair, right? To say like, hey, we're 3 times better than the competition, according to this Stanford study. And who are you to question Stanford, right? I mean, it so I mean, look, if they can justify those results, fine. But if there were problems with the methodology and there were problems with the study, or there were things that they weren't doing that might have made this a little more trustworthy or whatnot, then that's incredibly unfair to Thomson Reuters.
Yeah,
Yeah.
also worth
They
noticing,
need
just real quick, that somebody pointed out that they also didn't have the latest version of the Lexus AI product either in this thing. So whatever. Sorry, Joe, go ahead.
Oh no, I just they needed to be done before the Pac-12 conference dissolved. So put a lot of pressure on a lot of those schools.
That's it. That's it.
Maybe they wanted to get in before the jury came back, and in that other case.
Yeah. Right. But they knew they were fighting the news cycle with Trump. It was either going to be just an legal vendor AI study, or
Maybe now they wish they had waited.
I don't know. Maybe it drew more attention to the study than it would have before. But I will tell you this: I think there were a lot of people that don't care about the second study. That they got bad press on the first one. In legal, a lot of times you only get one bite at the apple when you try something like this. And my guess is there's a lot of people that go, okay, well, yeah, great, they've come out with another study, but how did they screw this one up, right? And so, and again, I thought the study was really good. And Stephanie, back to your point, I will say this: Lexus is probably the one that still has on their website hallucination free, and it might as well be like 3 asterisks, right after that, because it's like, well, but it's only it comes back with inaccurate results, but if those results aren't accurate, then then it's not really a hallucination. I was like, well, no, that's really a
I
hallucination.
mean, That's honestly my biggest problem with any of this. The study aside, the responses aside, like you should not be putting the words hallucination free. And like as of the time Isha wrote her article, those words existed without 3 asterisks behind them on the Lexis copy
They're still
because
there.
we linked to it. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm gonna call you on that.
One thing I thought, go ahead, Joe. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I was just going to say, like this whole hallucination thing. I mean, I think there are a couple levels of hallucination, right? There's making up things that just don't exist, and then there's misinterpreting stuff that humans would look at and go, obviously that's not what that meant, but like you're misunderstanding it in this way that's really bad. And I mean, I think great point is the best one, which is that, like, the more detailed your answer is, the more you're going to get punished because the more bad stuff leaks in. Likewise, the less detailed your answer, the less useful it is in any real, serious, actionable way, right? Like if the answer is, can people be convicted of false bookkeeping if they're also doing a campaign finance? There's a lot to say about that. And if you give an answer yes or no, it's not really all that great an answer. So I don't know. Like the hallucination thing, I I kind of roll my eyes at all the way around because I think the problems of hallucination that we talk about with ChatGPT is not the kind of hallucination problem any of these products necessarily have, and these are hallucination problems that they shouldn't be advertising themselves as being hallucination free. They're hallucination free to the extent that they aren't making up airline cases like ChatGPT per se, but that doesn't mean it's not hallucinating in ways that a lawyer needs to be worried. Guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Well,
Right.
and they talked about, they defined, somebody said we need to define hallucination. They did try and
Yeah.
define it in the report, and maybe they might have defined it a little bit differently than some people would otherwise define it. But I thought one of the interesting things in the report also was that they dinged products for saying, I'm not able to answer that, which I actually thought was a good thing for AI to say, I'm
I think
not
that's a
able to
great
answer that.
thing. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and also I feel like we've like progressed far enough in this conversation where like when we first started talking about any of this, you all would roll your eyes at me and be like, Stephanie's going to talk about AI again. And I'm like, yes, I am. Deal with it, y'all. And I'd be like, yes, there's a difference between GPT 3.5 and ChatGPT. And now here we are. And I'm like, we lead into these things where like hallucinations matter because we've progressed far enough that people are casually throwing around terms like retrieval augmented generation and RAG like they know what it means. And like RAG is this magic bullet. And it's not. I mean, if we're going to go there and it's a regular term, it's not a magic bullet at all. It makes things better, but it doesn't get rid of hallucinations. And so I'm going to be that annoying person that's like, if we're going to pretend to use the SAT words here, let's use them and learn what they mean. Like this stuff actually does matter if we're going to live in this world. And I'll continue to be the nerdy one. I don't care.
We're just going to block you, Stephanie, because we don't want any bad news about AI.
Well, then you will have an all male show. And how will that go?
Oh, no, please, not again.
Oh yeah, we had one a couple. We had one a few months ago. It was weird.
It was terrible, terrible.
Come on, bros. Is there like one of the things I've been wrestling with is what's the takeaway out of this study for legal professionals who use these products? I mean, one of the points they make in the study is that if these products are supposed to save time, but there's still the sort of high rate of error, meaning you still have to be checking everything that these products are telling you. Are you really saving any time by using generative AI?
Yes, you are. You're saving time on the front end. Maybe you still have to check when humans did it. You have to check it now. You're not saving time on the checking end. You're saving time on did it take you a week to research it or 3 hours? That's where you're saving the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess the equation you have to do is the first year associate is the amount of time they take to run a series of searches, read a bunch of cases, and draft a memo, faster or slower than the amount of time it takes for them to get a spit out from one of these products and then site check every bit of it to make sure it's right. I am guessing it is faster to do the site checking job because it really only becomes a longer process if you find mistakes. But there's something to be also said for if you start finding mistakes, then you're back at the beginning where you have to do everything the normal old school way, and then that's going to be longer. So then the question becomes, is that going to happen more often than the opposite? If it's more often than not going to be okay, then yes, you save time. There's an equation. Somebody write down all the variables I just had there, but there's a long equation that we are going to dub Patrice's law on this show, and then that's how you decide whether you can use it.
Yeah, I'm gonna start a murder board over here and start having the red string going between the different types. I will say this, that you know, one of the things, and I had Ed Walters from VLEX on, and they were talking about their iManage and their Vincent AI tool integration, which is really interesting. But one of the stories that he told, and I think this is something that we've all learned through using AI, whether it's the commercial based ones like ChatGPT or if it's the legal research ones, that sometimes it makes you kind of think of ideas that you wouldn't have normally done. And so he talked about trying to trick his system by giving it some fact patterns around driverless cars and unoccupied driverless cars, and who would be liable for damages. And the AI came back and said, no, there is no current case law on this directly, but an equivalent might be, and he said he started citing to 1930s cases when elevators went from manual operated to automatic, but push button, and there were some cases there. And so I think that was one example of, okay, well, let me, that might have been something I hadn't thought of. So to just kind of say, oh, it's terrible or it's good, it's both.
And you know what? I mean, I don't think VLEX fast case gets enough love. But on that note, and the reason I say this is because they are to this day the only people. It was Ed Walters giving me a demo a few months ago of something VLEX. And I asked a question because he was giving me like their standard demo, like all the companies do. And I asked a question. I was like, well, what if you asked this instead? He's like, that's a good question. I suspect this. But he's like, it'll only take 5 minutes. I'm just going to roll the dice and do this live in front of you and see what it spits out. And it did it. Like, no, everyone's so protective of what they show usually because they have their controlled demo questions, their controlled whatever. And he's like, we're just going to see what it does. And it did what he expected it to do. And I was like, see, that's actually cool. Like, you trusted your product enough to do it in front of a journalist, see what it did. And he like had no qualms about it. I'm like, so I just gave them points for that.
Yeah.
If you don't think Fastcase gets enough love,
and
then read the comment thread to Greg's interview with Ed Walters, because it's all these people saying Ed is brilliant and Ed is great.
Well, no. I mean, I think they get like amongst the
Yeah.
people, the real people, they get the love, but I don't think they get the like. Once you start talking about research, it's like obviously only TR or Lexis. I'm like, but
yeah.
Well, I mean, they're still pretty small in the market. The other thing is, and again, Ed and Phil and even the VLEX guys have built human capital a little bit different, or they've built relationships different than the two big ones, or even I would say even like Bloomberg. They're much more personable, approachable, willing to kind of roll the dice, but I think that's just part of being a smaller company looking to break in.
All right, have we beat this horse dead, or?
Oh, I could talk all day about this.
Guilty on all counts. Stanford guilty on all counts. Well, where do we go from here? Victor, you guys had a really you posted a really interesting piece. I assume it's from your June issue of your magazine coming out. But you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, so like every year, we have a set of like recurring features, and one of them is that we crowdsource tips from lawyers, legal professionals, people in the industry, and just to get sort of a panoply of views on things. We've had different topics in previous years. I think last year's was like things I wish I'd learned in law school. And the year before was like wellness tips for lawyers. One year we did like tips for lawyers who want to start their own practice. So this year we looked at we asked a bunch of lawyers, and legal professionals and people in the field, what was something that you learned from the pandemic, or something that you instituted during the pandemic that you've kept since things have gone back to normal. And I'll put the link there.
I
And
just
yeah,
put
so
it
these were the answers that we got. It was a pretty good mix of, like, it wasn't all like it wasn't all like the usual like tech folks and whatnot. We tried to get a wide view of lawyers and people in the industry who weren't who had like all kinds of practices, all kinds of things that they did. And obviously you had your some of your typical tech stuff, like someone like Greg put the cloud in there, and also having disaster plans in place and being flexible and things like that. But then other stuff was just more your typical like using conferencing tools for meetings instead of forcing everyone to come out of the office, but then making sure you still try to like maintain some semblance of like human connection and call and culture building and stuff like that. So take a look at it, see which ones resonate with you, and if they all just kind of don't don't make an impact on you, then you're way ahead of all of us then. But check it out and see what it's like. I mean, I think there's a weird numerical error on the print version, but it got fixed in the online version. So we're going to call that a hallucination on our end.
and you're not going to tell us what the weird print number error was? It's
I think it was somehow
31 tips or something.
Well, like no, nine got placed before 8, I think, or something like that.
Oh.
But again, we'll blame that one on the we'll blame that one on the AI.
One of the things I thought was interesting about it, you mentioned this, Victor, but a lot of the tips were all about how, I learned how important technology is in my practice, and I learned to use this kind of technology tool or that kind of thing. But then at the same time, it was also, I learned how important human connections are, and I learned how important it is to have some downtime and step away from things. So there was this sort of, tech focus, but lifestyle and whatever focus to it as well. It's interesting because those are, I don't know, if those feel like very different lessons, but I guess they go hand in hand.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy to think how much things have changed just even in the last few years, right? I mean, we never would have been doing this, if it hadn't been for the lockdown, right?
Yeah.
I'd still be commuting into the office, 5 days a week and not thinking anything of it. I think most of us would be doing that, and well, maybe not you, Bob. I think you've always worked from home, but yeah, I mean, it's crazy to think that this is sort of like where things have come over the last few years. I mean, especially for an industry like law, where showing up is such a big part of the equation as far as getting ahead, making connections, getting a name, getting your name out there and whatnot. And I mean, there's so much of it is face to face, so much of it is retail, so much is just the so-called like water cooler talks where you just run into someone and just shoot the breeze with them, and then somehow that leads to like a mentorship that endures for the next 3 decades. So it's just crazy that we've come so far just in such a short amount of time. And I mean, for those of us who myself included, who kind of thought everything would just go back to normal after things lifted, I mean, it's kind of interesting to just see how that's not been the case.
I haven't read the report, but one of the things that I was pointing out during the height of the pandemic was people were generally were doing really good work, even remotely. And there'd always been this lack of trust, especially in law firm staff, that if you're not in the seat, you're going to be home, eating bonbons and watching TV, right? And that turned out not to be true in most cases, and in a high majority of cases. But boy, as soon as it came time to come back into the office, that trust kind of went back out the window. And it was like, no, you have to be, now granted, they had to kind of give, it's okay, you can have 1-2 days a week that you can work remotely, but but the other days you have to be here, and we're going to walk around and ding you if you're not.
The irony is the law firm has free bonbons, like in the kitchen.
That's why I'm here 5 days a week, Joe. And a liquor cabinet. It doesn't have a lock on it.
Yeah, see, like, yeah, no, I agree completely with all of that though, but it is true that like I do a lot less of that sort of stuff now that I work from home mostly. When I was in a firm and everything was free around me, I was all sorts of slovenly.
All
I'm
right,
going to go with
well,
the super harsh reality also of if I was still making my big law salaries, I would be less salty about the in-office rules they were placing on me than I am currently about my journalism salary and the increasingly petty enforcement of our in-office rules. Glad I just said that publicly, but here we are. Yeah.
well, hopefully nobody from ALM is watching today.
Either way, I mean, I've said it internally, so it's fine. It's not a secret.
Now, this is behind a paywall, right? Aren't we behind a paywall?
Yeah, we're behind the paywall. Yeah, you have to
Yeah.
be you have to be sending me a check every week for $50 in
Pa-
order to
Patreon or whatever. Yeah.
Patreon. Yep.
You've been
Not
taking the
bad.
money
Yeah.
this whole time, Bob? What are we doing? At least once a year,
Absolutely.
buy us a drink. Come on.
Absolutely. I'll buy you a drink. Cheap one. Well, a
Happy
well
hour.
drink. Um, so we haven't had a clueless criminal story for a while here, but
Oh yeah.
got one this week.
So yeah, this one got a little bit of virality the other day. I didn't actually write about this for us because I was on a plane yesterday, uh, but I had already seen it. Like we were talking about, there's some grand advantages to being able to do things remotely and to go to court using Zoom and stuff like that. Uh, Unfortunately, for one poor guy who decided to show up to his hearing from his car, not just from the driver's seat of his car, but while it was moving, which was probably unwise in any event to be calling onto into a court proceeding while it's moving. It was super unwise given that the judge was looking at the man's record and said, but you have a suspended license. This was something that he had not really thought through, apparently. What's what bothered me about it actually as I watched the video was that the guy had a built-in excuse. Like I'm not necessarily advocating for lying to the court. So obviously, this is an excuse that he would had to have really meant. But he did at one point say, "Yeah, I'm pulling into a parking space at my doctor's office," and I'm like, "See, now when you get in trouble, what you could have tried to say is." I cut myself, oh, some kind of a medical emergency. I need to be at this doctor's appointment. My suspended license, I knew was a problem, but there's no other way to get there. We live in non-pedestrian friendly cities. It's a horrible thing that is largely classist based and has put people in bad position. Like he could have made those sorts of arguments to try and get out of it. But somehow the fact that he was going to a doctor's office then never comes up again. And so he ends up being informed by the judge that he will turn himself into the local jail by 6 p.m. I don't know how he's going to get to the local jail. I assume Uber, but he's going to get there somehow.
I mean, at that point, just drive yourself there, right? I mean,
Right? Yeah. There's nothing worse than yeah. But
Right.
my takeaway on it was that like we've said, there've been a bunch of these. While the working remotely has been good for the legal profession by and large, there are places where it may not be the best option, and one of those might be zooming into your hearing to see if you are going to have to go to jail. That is probably a bad one to do.
Yeah. So, all right. Another case of guilty on all counts.
Yeah, I mean, maybe there wasn't like a grand thing to spark conversation on that one, but it was a fun one.
Did you cover this on CNN last night? Is this...
No, we didn't. So the show I was on is a show that is specifically called Trump on Trial, so only that. It's like we don't get into anything else. So
That sounds
yeah,
boring.
truth in advertising. It's cool.
yeah. Well, so I'll tell you. So inside baseball. So I was told I was going to be on it a couple days before. So I was on a plane. I landed. I got a train from
Good.
there into the city. Whatever. Yeah, thanks. Got in. And how they kind of do it to make sure that you don't seem completely crazy on these shows is the producer kind of asks your thoughts about the topic. You write your thoughts to them, then they kind of reverse engineer those into questions. So you're being asked about something that you already have said, this is going to get this kind of answer, which makes sense, whatever. So I had wrote
Just like
all
we do on
that.
this show.
Yeah, right. So I'd written all of this out and I was about to send this long email and my finger was over the send when somebody said, the jury is in. And I paused on Twitter and I paused and I deleted like 1,000 words worth of stuff and said, I kind of think tonight's going to be weird. And that's how it worked. They said at that point, they didn't even know whether they were going to do the show. They were just like, just come in and we'll see what happens. So it was really kind of a looser atmosphere last night.
Well, sounds good.
Cool.
Stephanie, did you have a story this week? You did not, right?
No, totally didn't even think about it. I wasn't even sure I'd be able to be on and just completely blanked on giving you a story. I could try to think of one off the top of my head.
Well, no, that's okay.
We can
Did you have one,
transition
Bob?
We got other stuff.
We do.
I can think about one while you talk about something, Bob. How about that?
Well, okay. I mean, mine is in a way a little bit boring, but I thought it was really interesting, which was the news this week that the American Arbitration Association had acquired this site called ODR.com. And to me, this is interesting. I do arbitration. I'm actually a AAA panelist. I've been doing arbitrations for a number of years, and I was going back through some stuff I'd written, and I have written about online dispute resolution for like 20 years or more, and it's just like never taken off. It's like one of those things that's sort of like very slowly, hardly ever taken off until sort of the pandemic came along and obviously gave it a boost. And suddenly people were understanding but I mean, even then it just kind of became video hearings online. I mean, it wasn't really online dispute resolution. And there are forms of ODR that have been very successful. Like everybody talks about eBay is, one of the most successful dispute resolution programs in the world, but that's all for like $5 disputes over, I didn't get the postcard I ordered or something. But the American Arbitration Association last year named Bridget McCormick as their president and CEO, who's the former Chief Justice of the Michigan Supreme Court, and who was an advocate for tech innovation when she was Justice of the Court, a big advocate for access to justice issues, and she's just been, really kind of shaking things up at the AAA, I think, and really kind of bringing them into the new whatever century we're in, and this ODR.com group was run by a guy named Colin Rule, who has also been one of the sort of leading trailblazers and pioneers in online dispute resolution going back a number of years. I came across in doing the story, a story Victor wrote covering a panel Colin and I were on at the ABA Tech Show in 2016, kind of talking about how ODR had, in a lot of ways, hadn't really caught on all that much at that point. So I think this is really kind of significant, not for Zoom trials or something, but for really starting to drive a whole new era of tech-driven dispute resolution across all sorts of sectors, including arbitration and mediation, as they talk about ombuds services and all sorts of other things. So that was kind of big news.
Yeah, I actually thought that was super interesting too, because like when I practiced, I largely did arbitration as well. So, and it was very archaic. Even though you weren't necessarily tied to as many rules as you were in the courts, even when e-filing was a thing, it was still somehow more archaic, even though you should have been able to do more via email and electronically and whatever. And I think, Bridget McCormick is awesome. And I mean, in terms of what she's doing with it all. And so I was actually really happy to see it on top of like the AAAI labs or whatever they announced more recently. I think she's doing great stuff. So I don't think it was boring at all, Bob.
Yeah, no, it was definitely interesting. I mean, like, because I remember I read your story, and before I even like really started reading it, I was like, because I saw ODR.com, I'm like, I wasn't sure if that was Colin's thing, because these websites, who knows, right? But then once I
Right.
saw, oh, that was his, I was like, okay, yeah, then that's the guy you want to get, right? That's the guy that you would want to go into business
Yeah.
with if you really want to supercharge this thing. So it'll be interesting to see what they do.
Yeah. I think also another interesting side note about the AAA is another person they hired last year was Steve Eric, who had previously driven a lot of the new products and innovation at Fastcase. You know, we talked before about Fastcase sometimes doesn't get the credit it deserves, and Steve may be one of those people who also doesn't get the credit he deserves for. He's a real behind the scenes kind of guy in a lot of ways. He's not out there doing a lot of panels and talking a lot, but he was at Lexis before that, right? Lexis or Thomson Reuters? No, I forget which he was at. Lexis, I think, before
It
he
was
went
Lexis.
to Fastcase, and then Fastcase, and now here. So definitely a group to watch in terms of what's going on. Greg, what about you? Do you have anything else you were
Yeah,
doing
well, I
this
kind
week
of
or
mentioned it. The podcast I had this week with Ed Walters, and they're working with iManage. There's actually two things, so I don't want to downplay both announcements. But the second one was being able to automate loading of docket
The document
information
alarm stuff.
directly into iManage, which is not nothing, but I thought the first one was kind of a big deal because almost since the word chat GPT came into law firms and LLMs, all of a sudden everyone was an LLM expert. I would get person after person after person that would say, oh, this is going to be great when they just take my iManage or DMS information and they just create a large language model directly from that. And then that way we'll be able to answer everything in our own voice. And then I was like, that's not how this works. But I do think that one of the things that the iManage and VLEX collaboration is doing, and my guess is this is probably the first of many, is that on the new iManage cloud, well, I guess it's not new, but on the cloud version, basically you can set up a KM system. It's an expert, set of documents that you curate
Yep.
that is kind of your best practice documents. And the way that the Vincent AI tool from VLEX works is it essentially interacts with those core documents, almost in a RAG style. This is where RAG is good.
Yeah.
And so,
No, I never said rag is bad. I just said it's
yeah.
not magic. It's not
Oh, it's
perfect.
not magic. No.
Yes.
You and I we're on the same page there.
Yeah.
But it's going to be really, really interesting because it's kind of like when, if you remember when WestKM came out and you could do legal research and then you could also see your internal documents at the same time. This is along that same line, but it's a set group of documents and, and it's artificial intelligence, not just Boolean searching or citation matching with your own documents. So I think people are going to get really excited about this. The fact that VLEX is the first to market with this may open some doors for them that wouldn't open normally, just because this has been something that has the partners have been kind of demanding happen almost since November of 2022.
Yeah, Ed did say that these two, they announced that in the docket alarm. He said these are just the first two integrations they're announcing out with more to come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are some others doing that docket integration. I mean, I happen to know Pacer Pro does that,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
into Net Documents. I don't know if they do it in iManage, but I know they do it in Net Documents. So that kind of thing is happening. But yeah, I think it seemed like a really cool development from them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes you
Um,
wonder why things take so long.
Well, I mean, I know Nikki is not here. We were going to talk about last week. Can Joe please talk about ScarJo? Because I feel like I might disagree with him a little, and that would be a fun way to end it.
I no, I hear that. I want to hold that still because I
Okay,
feel like
fine.
I feel like we're like 9 minutes till done, and I feel like this one supports an even longer conversation,
I
uh, but we can preview it for the future, which is the conversation about Scarlett Johansson's legal fight against OpenAI. Not that it's a fight yet, but
not
apparently
even a
there
legal
was.
fight yet. Yeah, it's just
But well, I mean, I use cease and desist order letters
yeah.
as the beginnings of a legal fight. That they had been caught using something that sounded very much like her, as Nikki has talked about on this show, and they said, well, they weren't really using her voice. They just used an actor impersonating her character from the movie where she played an AI. She sent the cease and desist, and she's released a statement saying she's interested in hearing that they kind of are demanding all of the documents about how they came to that decision and how they did it. Because obviously, I think if it's just an impersonation, there's some legal questions which we can get into in a deeper conversation. But obviously, if they use some sort of like auto tuning, AI auto tuning to make an actress sound more like her, that then gets a lot closer to real AI related problems. So that's out there. This conversation. Can you do that? Nikki and I had some disagreements about whether or not that's legal. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, and I've since talked to some IP lawyers about it, and there is legitimate differences on this
There are.
issue. So
Yes.
there's some things to actually dig into.
Yes. I'm surprised the movie studio or other people that own like the rights to the movie haven't been more active about maybe making a claim to the
Which
character.
I am prepared to have an even longer diatribe about that too, because that was a thing that came up as well. They have tried to do stuff like that in the past in other contexts and been uh, shut down by courts. And so they might be gun shy about asserting their rights as a movie studio because of some losses they suffered in the past, trying to own a character,
Sure.
which I thought was interesting because I was like, I think the characterization is entirely a work for hire, but
Yeah.
apparently not.
But wasn't
It's very interesting.
wasn't there like that Back to the Future thing where they tried to pretend like Crispin Glover was in the movie, but he wasn't, and so then he challenged them by saying, "Oh well, you clearly were trying to make it seem like it was me, even though you didn't say it was." So I mean, yeah. So I would
Yeah.
argue that, well, clearly they're trying
Yes.
to tie this to the movie because otherwise, why would they use a voice that sounded like Scarlett Johansson? They could have chosen any voice, right?
Well,
They could have chosen
But like,
Gilbert
well,
Godfrey.
why would the CEO tweet one word
Her.
yeah.
Yes.
her?
So I think it's indisputable, and now here we go. I think it's indisputable that they're trying to do that character. But now, one of the things in our conversation that I said is abstract this out a little bit. Say they made a sequel and she didn't want to be in it. They would do somebody to get somebody to try and be that character, and it's not like we think she could sue over that. So
Well,
then why do we think?
which is why I said
Yeah,
I would be more interested
right.
to see if the movie studio would try to have a claim against them for this. I also think
Which
it's an
was my first thought.
interesting characterization because, like you were saying, like how many actors have a claim over their voice, like maybe a James Earl Jones,
Right.
or I would throw in like a Morgan Freeman or whatever. But in this particular instance, she doesn't appear on screen at all. Physically, it's only her
True.
voice in that movie, which is interesting. I also would like to point out that it being Sam Altman's favorite movie, and he thinks that it got it exactly right about how AI and humans should interact is a really frightening prospect. Because I don't know if
Since it's a
anyone has
cautionary tale.
watched it recently or rewatched it. I forgot how it ends. I won't spoil
Yeah.
it for you if you want to rewatch it, but it's bleak, and that is maybe not how we should want AI human interaction to end.
Well, I mean, what's the famous viral tweet somebody wrote a while back? It's something like sci-fi author in the 60s. I came up with the concept of the torture vortex as a cautionary tale. And the next thing is tech bro in 2020s. We have finally brought to reality the torture vortex from the classic sci-fi novel. mean, that's what it is. Like this is a cautionary tale about AI, and he thinks it's the best thing in the world. Yeah,
Isn't all this
it is
publicity good for the movie studio? I mean, this is going to drive people back
also
to
true.
watch
Yeah.
the movie. And
Yeah, I mean,
Awful.
that movie was out in 2013. I thought I remembered it being more recent. I only know this because I literally spent half a day editing multiple articles about this one day, and so I'm very fresh on this movie, and I also rewatched it. But also the point who said,
13
yeah,
is recent.
where like ScarJo is
I
not
say
really
this.
shy
It's
about
not my
litigation.
birthday today, but I'm gonna say that.
She she took on that. I mean, that woman took on Marvel. So I mean, she is a force to be reckoned with, and yeah,
Mhm.
I don't know. I don't know.
Joe's
I
to
don't.
back her up.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot, and
Simon's a little creepy. I'm just
All
gonna
right,
go with
all right.
that.
We'll have to
Believe
hope
that.
Nikki's back next week.
I know.
we'll get more.
We will. I want to be here when Nikki is here also, because
Okay.
this will be fun.
There were. Did you see the rumor? Not rumors. There were reports going around that her company's on the block again. So we will see if there's news around that.
Ooh.
Who knows?
Coincidence, I'm sure.
Maybe that's what she is this week. She's finalized. She's closing the sale on it.
Getting the check, picking up the check. Yeah. All right. Well, I think that does it. I think we managed to fill out 58 minutes anyway out of these 60, and that's pretty darn good.
And it'll be June the next time we're together. I don't know how that happened.
It will be June. Yeah, I know it. What's coming up next week? Is there anything coming up? Are people going to conference? What's coming up? Oh no, nothing in June, right? Is there any conferences in June? I've got a conference in June, but just a small thing. But I can't think of anything else going on.
There's legal
None
geek
of
in
you are going to
Chicago.
AA double L. Greg, are you going to AA double L?
Oh, yes, I am.
Oh,
I am
you're
going.
Okay.
Chicago, June
Might just be
20th,
you and me there, I
or
think.
July 20th to
Oh, that's July.
23rd.
Is
Actually,
anyone
we
going
didn't
to?
mention.
Oh yeah,
We should
Legal
also
Innovators
mention Gino
California
Grady,
is-
our usual panelist here, who's I think probably still off in Spain hiking or something. But AA double L has picked her as their lifetime achievement award or something like that.
Good
She's
for
getting
Jean.
Okay.
honored there. So yeah, good for her.
Yes.
I may not make that, but now I will try to make that. But
I
I was
know.
planning on not making anything until tonight. So
I wasn't going to go to AA double L either, but for Jean, I might. I will be at Legal
Yeah.
Geek in Chicago.
okay.
Yeah. So, okay.
All right. All right. We will see you all next week, I hope. And Greg, hope you have a great rest of your birthday.
Thank
Yes.
you very
Happy
much.
birthday, Greg.
Thank
Happy
you.
birthday.